All right. So last class we got started on uh, JavaScript arrays, and we also looked at briefly into JavaScript objects. Right. These are the two most important data structures that you're going to be using. Before we move forward, let me just show you the learning path for this class. Which I was thinking, okay, the best way to approach it. And again, the objective of this class is to actually learn React in the end, right? And JavaScript is the first step. If you have a very good understanding of JavaScript, you can easily learn React. I would say React is a subset of the JavaScript that you're going to do, right? It doesn't have, you're not going to be using pretty much everything that you have in JavaScript. And that's why I'm keeping the learning part of JavaScript minimum as possible, and for a good reason, right? If you try to learn everything in JavaScript, it takes a lot. JavaScript is a huge topic. Okay, there's so many different things, including DOM manipulation and all that stuff. But we're not going to go into it because React. A lot of the things that you do with the DOM manipulation, React takes care of it underneath. So you never have to do this. And even if you go for like a corporate job, even JavaScript or React, you were not gonna do the DOM manipulation. So why learn that, right? So this is a shortcut path to React. And also I'm teaching you the latest version of JavaScript. If you go on a web or a lot of courses, they use old version of JavaScript, which can be really confusing. So I'm trying to, minimize that. So what we're going to learn is the first class we learned about the variable types, operators, right? How to define a variable, what are the different data types are, and some operator like equal sign, triple equal sign, and all that stuff, right? And we looked at some string methods and number methods, and some type conversion. And then we looked at arrays, some array methods, like when you can add stuff, remove stuff, like we learned about the pop, push, splice, and things like that, right? And then we looked at some object methods, right? To, add stuff to objects and things like that, right? Then today we're gonna learn more about objects and how to mix arrays and objects together, right? Which is very important. We're gonna also look at scope in JavaScript. Scope is basically what can you access. So if you have defined a lot of things in JavaScript, you may have access to certain things, and so to understand is very important, right? Then we're gonna look at some. In next class, we're going to look at some basic stuff like statements and loops. So let's say if you're coming from other languages like Java and other C++, there's if and else statement to make some decision. If you want to loop through something, repeat something, there's a for loop and things like that. And so we're going to get some basics, basic JavaScript statements and loops out of the way, so we can do all those operations, right? And then we go to functions. Functions are pretty important, right? So you can repeat stuff and make this make your code modular. We're going to learn about something called arrow functions and its operation, and something called callback functions. And we're going to look at some of the methods called map, reduce, and filter. Then I think this would be just enough to learn, basic JavaScript. And then while we are learning React, if there's something that we need to learn, then we can just go back to the topic rather than just learning a lot of JavaScript. We're just gonna then move to React. But before we move to React, I wanted to give you a little tutorial on Flex layout. So what is Flex layout? Those who know CSS, there are many ways to do CSS, right? So I wanted just to give you in one one lesson, I want to teach you how to arrange things on a page, right? And using flex layout. And it's probably the fastest way to learn CSS. Okay, so now that you have, at that point, CSS and JavaScript knowledge, we can move to React. So we can start with some basic intro and environment setup, and state management. Then next time after that, we learn some fragments using material design, which is a package that makes, let's say if you build a button or some object, it makes things very prettier. So you don't have to do all the styling for it, right? We can look at the click events, like if you click on a button, if you enter something in an input box and things like that, how would that work, right? And then there's some other stuff. And at the end of it, we're gonna start building with a simple game, right? So let's say, so we are here. So 1, 2, 3, next 3 classes, we're gonna learn JavaScript. Then fourth one, we'll go through some CSS. Then fifth, 6th, 7th, 8th, we're gonna learn React. And then starting 9th, we're gonna build a game, and then you're gonna start building some game using. So we're gonna learn some game theory and things like that to build a React-based game, right? And believe me, once you start doing React, you're gonna really love JavaScript because React makes things much easier because it will have your CSS, HTML, and JavaScript all in one single place, right? Yeah, so this is an overall learning path, and then rest of the classes, we're gonna just basically build games and learn stuff around it. Okay. Any questions on this one? All right. Yeah, if there's no questions, we can get started. So let's start with objects. Where we ended, and then we can also go with the mix the objects and arrays. So all right, open CodePen as usual. All right, so let's just recap the objects, right? So objects are basically, remember, arrays are like lines, right? Or queues, or a bag where you put things and things kind of placed one by one. Objects are not like that. Objects is like your dinner plate where everything is accessible to you, right? So there's no order. You just grab it based on, you have some sort of key, and you just grab it by key. So remember when we looked at an object called let's say bag, and then we had quantities, right? So it was equal to, and so objects are defined using curly brackets, and I can have eggs colon. So eggs is a key, right? And the quantity would be 2, right? Let's say pen, 4, mouse, let's say 12, milk, 1 milk, right? So this is my bag. Remember, there are no indexes. There are only keys and values, and key is the one on the left side, and values are the one on the right side. So if I want to access eggs, I would just say, hey, give me the value of eggs, right? So let's say call it total eggs, egg count, or something like that. I'm going to create a variable called egg count. And then if I console log egg count, okay, it gives me 2. right? Similarly, I can create pen count, and then I'll just pass pen, right? And then if I console log pen count, it'll give me 4, right? So it gives me 4 here. What if I try to get something count bag, and let's say bottle, right? Which doesn't exist in here. Okay, and then try to, let's say, console log it. It says undefined. So this would give me undefined, right? Because it doesn't exist. So let's try this out and then understand objects a little bit better, right? So I want you to open CodePen and then create a bag, add your favorite items and then counts, and then try to access it. Objects are pretty simple, right? Because you can just say, okay, give me this, and it just gives you the value of that, right? And then if anytime you need to replace it, right? All I have to say, let's say if I want to replace, add one more egg to this, right? Then what I would do is I would just simply say bag eggs equal to 3, right? And then what it does is, let me console out bag. What it would do is it would go and replace the count of eggs from 2 to 3. Okay, let me do one thing. Behavior auto updating for the fonts. Okay, so this is actually reading from the bag. This is writing to the bag. So let's just play around with for a few minutes. I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to do that. And let me know if you have any questions. If something doesn't work and things like that, let me know. And also last thing is if I want to remove something from the bag, let's say if I want to remove milk, right? Then to do this, I would just say delete bag and milk. And if I run this, it would not have milk inside, right? So this is how to access thing. This is how to modify this thing, and this is how to delete it. All right. Any question on this one? Okay. So the syntax is it's pretty nice. However, there's a better syntax available, which is, let's say, let me just use this. So I'm going to keep a running list of things, and I'll post it on Discord once everything is there. So let's say if I want to get the account, right, but not use this syntax, I can use a dot. So I would just say bag dot eggs. It's exactly the same thing. I can say bag dot pen. It's exactly the same thing. Bag bottle, right? So I can just replace with milk. And it would give me the same result, right? So this is a nice little syntax. It's called dot operator. So I can get any value by using a dot. The only time you cannot use a dot is, let's say if I have, you know, something with break inside. So let's say if I have, let's say, how do I say this? Something with a break inside. Let's say cell phone. And I wrote it like this, let's say. I could write something like this, right? But if I wrote it like this, I'd say one cell phone. This is an invalid syntax. If there is a break, I have to use quotes around it. Okay. I would suggest never leave like a break inside, but if you have to, it supports it, right? In this case, I cannot use a dot operator like this. Let's say if I want to change the cell phone count from 1 to 2, then what I would do is here, I can say bag, since I cannot use a dot operator, right? I cannot say cell phone, right? It doesn't understand it. So what I have to do is I have to use that old method, cell space phone equal to 2. Okay, now if I run this, oh, I'm supposed to use comma here. That's fine. All right, so now it works. So try this. Most of the time you're going to be using dot operators, right? Which is the most important thing. Somebody's looking for Discord link. I'm going to quickly give, because they can join the meeting. And let me give them also the Zoom link. Hold on, give me. Okay, so. Okay. All right, so then. All right, sir, sorry about that. Somebody was asking for the Zoom link, so I just gave it to them. Okay, so now that we have that, let's, okay, so now that we have that, let's do a mix. Okay, somebody joined. Okay. Okay, that person is joining still, not sure when, but. All right, so now that you have it, I'm assuming that you already went through this. Let me clear this out. But objects in real lives are more complex than this. They're not simply either list or objects, right? They're a mix of things. So you can mix and match. For example, let's say if you those who use Facebook or other social media, when you start, you create a profile, right? So let's create a profile, which is always going to be starting with an object. So profile is going to have what? It's going to have a name. So let's say the name of the profile is profile is for John. Okay. What else can be here in the profile? Age, right? So let's say his age is 50 years old. You guys think of anything else that this person can have in a profile? Hobby. Yep. We can have hobby. Hey, hi, Benjamin. Welcome. So yeah, Benjamin, since you just joined, we're learning about JavaScript objects, and every class we record it. So We have recording from last class, so if you want to watch it, you can watch it over. Feel free to ask questions if you don't understand something. There are no stupid questions, right? If you don't understand something, always speak up, right?
All right.
What we're trying to do is we are trying to build a profile object, right? In JavaScript, you can create objects using curly brackets, and then inside you can have a key and value. So profile, this is for John, so his name is John. So John colon, and then we'll have name John, right? Age 50, and then let's say we want to say hobby. Now, hobby, a person can have multiple hobbies, right? So I can just say hobby is, let's say, traveling, right? Or, and then if I want to add some more hobbies, this is not sufficient, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use an array for that. So I can say travel, maybe photography, okay. I don't know, coding is a hobby, if that is such thing. Okay. Yeah, there are some people who code as a hobby, I guess. But anyway, so he's got 3 hobbies, right? So now actually I mix and match objects and arrays. So the value, so the first name, the value is a string, right? Oh, and then also where are they from, right? So yeah, city, right? You can have a city. Right? Let's say San Francisco or Bay Area, whatever you can put, right? Bay Area is a city, is the, or oh, Bay Area is not a city, sorry. San Jose, that's it. It's a city. And then and what else? What else can this be? Yeah, Benjamin. So we're just asking, like, what kind of properties can you add in a profile, right? So we can say name is a one characteristic of a let's say if you have a Facebook profile, right? You know, you would have name, you can have birthday, city, right? You can have a zip code and all that stuff, right? But we want to mix and match. So we have string type, we have a number type, and let's have a Boolean type. So is single, right? Is this person single? And we can say false, right? So we have a Boolean type also. So we have a string number, string Boolean, which is true and false, and then we have an array type. Okay, so we have multiple different types. What else can it be? So one type is missing. What do you think that type is? There's one type that is missing. Okay. Something, okay, well, maybe two types are missing, right? One type can be, let's say, something that doesn't apply to him. Okay, so let's say if profiles, what can be something specific that doesn't apply to John, or or this profile? So in that case, or something that we don't know, right? So we can just put it as a null. Let's say has money or income, right? We don't want to put wrong income here. So what we'll do, we'll just say null. Why would we put null? Because we don't know, basically. If we put 0, that means he doesn't have any income. right? If you put 1,000, that which means his income is $1,000. But if you put null, which means we don't know, or it's not, or it hasn't decided, he hasn't entered it, right? So we can do this way, right? There are in a profile, there are some options that are not a mandatory, right? So if it's not a required field, we can just put null for that, right? And you'll find that if you build something like this, you can use null for any kind of situation where you don't know what to put, right? So okay, and let's say what else can be something that we want to add, that is an object, right? So profile itself is an object, but we want to have a property that has an object as a value, right? So we can complete the cycle. We have a string as a value, we have a number as a value, we have a Boolean as a value, we have an array as a value, null as a value. We can add another object as a value. So what do you think can be a good object to put as a value? Any idea? Let's see, somebody says last name. I think last name is going to be a string. If this is the first name, then last name, if you put it as a string. But what I want is something more than a string. So for example, you see hobby here, right? Which is an array, which means it can have a multiple hobbies, right? What we want is something that has, let's have a family, right? Family can be complex. So family, you have to remember, arrays you just use for simple things, right? But family, I have to define the family members and its value, right? So I cannot simply just say, let's say his mom's name is, let's say his mom name is Jane or something, right? I cannot do this. And father's name is Bob, right? I cannot do this. I have to use an object, right? And I can say dad is Bob, mom is Jane, right? Children, right? See, I don't want to say child one, child two. I want to say children. Children can be an array, right? Because there can be multiple children. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it an array. And each item in the array, again, it's getting complex, right? And that's what we want. We want to have as complex as possible so we can see what is possible, right? So let's say the first child is, let's say Mary. And or we can just simply do this. Mary and let's say Peter. Okay. And let's add another one, Jill or something. I want to, okay. I think that's good enough, right? So now actually we have created this complex object. And in real life, your object's going to be like this. It's not going to be very simple, right? So how do I navigate to this? Remember, we learned about the objects. We learned about the arrays. Now, this is a mix of objects. We have object, and then we have inside, we have arrays as a value. And then we also have an object as a value. And within that object, we have another array, right? Okay, so let's look at the access. How do I access stuff? So if I want to access, let's say name, this is simple. profile dot name. If I console log this, let's call this a value. Okay, so this is a name. If I want to console log this, well, I would get obviously John, right? That's simple. How do I get age? Anyone? If I want to get age, which is 50, how do I get it? Let's see, somebody replied. Print while. So print is, so console log, Benjamin, console log, it's actually, in a way, it's print, right? So in other languages, we have print. In JavaScript, it's console log. Basically, if I pass anything to console log, for example, val is profile.name, which is this guy, right? So if I just pass this inside, it prints John here. Okay. Now, if I want age, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so it's just print. That literally just it. Right?
No, there's no print in JavaScript.
But it acts like it.
Yeah, console log acts like a print. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Console log acts like a print. It's yeah, Java. It's called println. I think it has a print. Python has a print, right? But JavaScript has console log. So if I want to get, let's say, age, then I would just say profile.age, right? And then if I run this, oh, well, I have to, sorry, not this. I'm always going to print val and I'm going to change it here, age, right? This way I can have a consistent view. So val is now age, which is 50, right? Now, you know, if I want to get city, I can simply just change it to city, right? And then val is going to be city, so I can print San Jose, right? Why do the income is going to give me null, right? It's going to give me null. All right. So far, so good. What if I want to get hobby? Same thing. If I just do hobby, it's going to give me all the hobbies, right? Travel, photography, and coding. What if I want to get the second hobby? How do I get that? Only photography. You know how to navigate arrays, right? In a previous class, we learned about it. So how do we navigate hobbies? Any idea?
Using brackets.
Yep. So we can use brackets. So what we do is square brackets. Split. No, not split. We would use, so remember, accessing, when we learn arrays, right? So let's look at the array fundamentals, right? So we have an array. Let's say this is an array, independent array. Let's say let hobbies equal to this, right? And let me comment this out so it doesn't interfere, right? If I want to get the first value of hobbies, I would just use square brackets, right? So I would say hobbies, square bracket. I want a first value. Remember, arrays always start from 0 in index. So just a 0, right? And I'll just console log hobbies 0. And when I do that, it gives me the first hobby, which is travel, right? If I want to grab the photography, I would say 2. Right? Oh, sorry, not 2, 1, right? So this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. So 2 gives me coding. If I do 1, it gives me photography. Right? So we know that this is how you access elements from the array independently, right? If this was an independent array. Now, let's comment this out and see how we can grab it from here. So what I want is from this object, profile object, I want a photography. So I know if I just do profile.hobby, that gives me the whole array, right? So all I have to do is what I did here. Square bracket 1. That's it, right? So give me profile, key is hobby, and then this is the first or the second value, which is the first index. And if I run this, I would get hobby or photography, right? The second element or the first index. Okay. All right. Now that we know this, you already know how to access objects and arrays. Now, this is just a mix and match. So you just have to apply that mix and match to this rule. Let's all try to give me the second child of this profile. So well would be Peter. How do I get the second child of this profile? Or second child of Peter. How do I get that? So just write this code and then change this such that the val will hold this value, Peter. Yep. So you get the dot family dot children. That's good. And then val 1. Perfect. Yep. That's it. Anyone else? Okay. So Talia, instead of having directly writing create another array from children, I want you to grab it from the profile object directly. And again, always think, so just keep, whatever the solution is, right? You just keep working on the top of it, right? This actually gives you a lot of clues. If I want to access property, I use dot. If I want to access arrays element, I just use a square bracket and the index inside, right? Use the same concept and just keep working on the top of it, right? Anyone? All right, I'm going to give you one more minute so that everyone tries. This is probably the most important part in JavaScript, right? You're going to deal with this kind of things a lot because imagine you are a front-end developer, right, at Facebook. When somebody logs in to their profile, the first thing you do is get their profile, right? So you make a query to the data to their server using REST API, say, give me the profile of this user. And what you get is something like this, right? And then based on this, you need to populate the screen where you want to list all the hobbies in one section. You want to show your family tree, you know, who's your relatives, whatnot, right? Obviously, it's not going to be exactly like this, but, you know, something similar. And, you know, you do all of these. And you have to navigate it. So this is a good exercise for you to work on. All right, so let's take a look at how we access it, right? So firstly, I'm just going to do one step at a time, right? If I want to get the children, first I have to get a family, right? So I'm just going to say profile dot family, right? And see what I get. So when I do that, I would get the whole object, which is dad, mom, children, right? So in this object, if I want to get children, which is just nothing but a property, another property, right? Because dad is a property, mom is a property, children is a property, and then the array is the value. All I have to do is dot children. Okay, and let's run it again. And then I get the children, right? And remember, if I want to get the second person, which is Peter, the index of the second person is 1, right? Index of Mary is 0, index of Peter is 1, index of Jill is 2. So all I have to do is square bracket 1. And I will get Peter, right? You just have to keep building on it, right? And so this is probably most important syntax. Okay, so let's expand on this one. So Mary, let's say each of these, like if you have a Facebook profile, you're not going to have simply name, you're going to have a profile itself, right? So I'm going to create, instead of Mary, I'm going to create an object similar to the profile of this, right? So again, we are going in another complex territory where I create an object, and this profile has name, call Mary, and comma, has age, let's say 20, right? Has city, same city. Well, she lives in, let's say, San Francisco. Right? She has some hobbies. Kayaking, they call it. Chilling and sleeping. Okay, Mary's pretty lazy. Okay, so we introduced another layer, right? Let me put this object in the chat so you can copy it. So you have to write the whole thing. Yeah, this is called nesting, right? I have nested objects and arrays and objects and arrays, right? So what I get here, right? I have a family. John has a family. It's got dad, mom, and bunch of children, right? And then it's got 3 children, Mary, Peter, and Jill. Again, if I copy this, I can actually build, well, let's just keep Peter and Jill like this for now. But eventually what you want is something, let's just do this, right? Let's not be lazy like Mary. Let's all have, okay, so this guy is gonna be Peter. This is gonna be Jill. He is 23. Jill is only 10. They all live in San Francisco. And Jill has no hobbies, or she hasn't entered any hobbies. And Peter has hobby of, let's say, watching TV. Okay. So one active student, one active kid, one is kind of lazy, and one is care about the privacy. So she hasn't entered anything. Let me copy this object, overwrite your object with this guy. Okay, this guy. Okay, so I put it in the chat. I know kind of going over the thing. That's why I put it so you can write it right now. Give me hobby of Jill. So this val should be give me Jill's hobby. Now Jill's hobby is basically null, right? So this val should be null. So access profile. Now you know if I want to get the property, I just use dot. If I want to, if I'm accessing arrays, I just use a square bracket. That's it, right? So give me the hobby of Jill in this case. I mean, this is pretty important. That's why, you know, it's pretty easy actually if you break this problem down into smaller problems, right? It may look quite, oh, this is so much information, right? But if you break it down, it's pretty simple. So I want you to really get used to this. So give me Jill's hobby. So the copy is copy the object that I provided in the chat, and then replace it with your, you know, profile variable. And sometimes you just want to break it down, right? And that may give you a little bit more clarity, right? So if I want to get a hobby of something, how do I do that in this object? And then if I want the first child, how do I do that, right? So yeah. And start by, you know, first grabbing the profile, right? Then grabbing the family and what you get, and then doing something, and then doing something until you get that to that last person. And send me a message if you finished it. Yeah. Yeah, if you can navigate through this, pretty much you can navigate through any object, right? Because ultimately what you're building is object inside array, array inside object, and object inside object, right? That's all it is. And if you can't visualize this in one line solution, break it down, right? If you break it down, it may help you solve the problem. Yeah, that's the right solution, Benjamin. Anyone else? All right, so let's try this. So, okay, I have a profile, right? If I need to get here, you can actually build backward as well if you want, right? If I have this object, what do I need? If we want to build backward, I would always say build forward, right? So, you know, Jill is part of the family, right? So I need to get the family. So I'm just going to say profile.family, right? Okay. Yeah, Raheem. Yeah, you're right too. Good job. If I run this, I get the whole family, right? Okay. And then I need children, right? Because obviously it's part of the children. So I'm just going to say dot children. Right. Clear this up. So that gives me only children, right? Okay, there are three children. There are three children, right? And this is an array. This is not an object. This is an array, square brackets, right? So if I want to get to Peter, the first element is Mary, the second is Peter, and the third is Jill. So this is 0, 1, and 2. So I need a second index. So what I need is, because it's an array, I have to use index, right? Simple. If it's an array, use index. If it's an object, use key, dot key, right? All right, let's run this. So it gives me Jill, right? And then I'll have, if I'm looking for hobby for Jill, right? Which is, this is an object, right? Curly brackets. Dot hobby. Right? Which gives me null. Okay. All right. So I'm going to copy this. I can provide the solution next for you guys. All right. Give me the number of children. Give me total children. John. How many children John has? Remember, to get a length of the array, we use length property, right, of an array. So how many children? John has. Yeah, that's right, Melissa. Anyone else? So what I'm looking for is 3, right? Because John has 3 children. And the hint is I need a length of an array to grab the how many total elements are there inside inside an array.
So where do you put the length?
So whichever object that you're trying to grab, right? So let's say if I'm trying to grab length of, let's say if I have a hobby, right? So let me give you here example. So if I want to grab length of hobbies, I would do hobbies dot length.
Oh, so we put it after. Okay.
After, yeah, whichever. So after the array dot, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think you missed the last class, so that's where we covered that. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, all you have to do is once you have the children, right? If I run this, I get all the children, right? Which is an array. And you can always see what it is by what is the first thing? Is as a square bracket or curly bracket? Here it's a curly bracket, square bracket, right? Which means this is an array. And if I just want the length of this array, I would just say, right? And that would give me the length 3. So I think now all of you are very proficient in this, right? It's a fun thing, right? So now if you, no matter how nested this object grows, right, you know how to access it. If you see a curly bracket, use a dot operator and then the value. If you see a square bracket, then you know it's an array. Then you can just use a square bracket and then index inside, right? So that's that. All right. So now that you know how to manipulate objects and arrays, let's, oh, you know what? Let's do a couple more things here. Okay. Remove. So far we accessed it, things, right? I want to remove the second child of John. Remove John's second child. Okay. Remember, removing something is, let's say if I have an array and the way you remove it is, let's say if I have an array of, let's say 0, 1, 2, 3, right? I have 4 elements. And if I remove, let's say, the second element, the third element, which is a second index, I would say, let's say this, let a, this is an array, this is an array. And if I want to remove, let's say 2, then I would say splice and then I need an index. So this is actually a second index, right? And I need to remove one item, basically. That's it. So this is the answer to remove a specific element from an array. So where the first element is the index from where I'm removing, right? Which is index 2, and the number of items. Number of items. Right? So the first is the index, and then the second is number of items that I'm removing. So how do you remove, what did I say? Peter, right? How do you remove Peter from here? Let's say John disowned Peter because he's just simply too lazy. How do you remove him? Or he's no longer has a profile. Start with accessing things, right? So you start with saying, okay, how can I access children? If I want to remove one of the children, what is the syntax to access the children? Print it, right? And then you get an array, right? So you need to make sure you get a array with square brackets, right? And then you can apply the splice. That's it. By the way, Benjamin, are you which language do you know already?
Python.
Python. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, JavaScript is kind of okay. JavaScript is it's an interesting language. It's very close to Python in many ways. It has very flexible way of handling variables, right? But Python is all like there are no semicolons, right? JavaScript, you don't have to put semicolons, but anytime you format, it automatically adds them.
I feel like this is way too different from Python. I don't think it's similar.
No, and not in similar in the sense it's syntax. Okay.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
In a lot of sense, it has. So if you think of Java, right? So Java is a very strict object-oriented programming language, right?
Yep.
If I define a variable, I have to say, oh, is it a string type or is it a number type and things like that, right? JavaScript is very flexible. When I define something, I'm not saying it's going to have a numbers or what. I just define something and it automatically assumes that I need an array. I need to create an array with numbers, right? Because I put numbers in it. So in that case, it's very flexible in nature. However, in terms of syntax, it's pretty different because it doesn't have the semicolon. It kind of changes how you write things. You have to use spacing and stuff like that, which JavaScript doesn't.
Yep.
All right, anyone? All right, so two things, right? If I want to remove the second child, I just have to, I'm assuming that this is the child, right? X is child. So all I have to do is profile dot family dot children. That's it. Okay. If I did that, then it says profile has family, family has children. Which is an array. I'm just splicing it, removing the second index, removing one element at a second index. All right, so if I print, let's just say, if I print now profile, or again, I also teach Python to kids, and sometimes I start typing Python syntax in JavaScript. Okay, splice. Property of undefined. Okay, some issue here. Let's see. So profile dot family. Okay. Dot children. Dot splice. Most of the time when there's an error, okay, right here. Okay, so now if you see number of children is 2, and I can prove it if I just do this, right? If I just say children dot length, and they should give me 2, right? Yeah, before it was 3, now it's 2. By the way, a quick lesson on arrays, since you just joined. Arrays, if you want to remove something from the end. So let's say if I have an array, right? Let's say A, B, C, and D. If I want to remove, let's say, if I want to remove the last element, the simpler way to do this is array.pop. Okay, if you do that, it removes the last. If I want to add something to the end, I can say array.push, and then I have to provide what am I adding. So let's say if I'm adding E to it, right, it adds to the last. Okay, so the push pop does that. If I want to add something to the front, so this is adding to the back of the element, right? Oh, sorry, removing from the back. This is adding to the back. Okay, if I want to remove something from the front, I would say array dot shift. So this removes. The reason it's called shift is because if I remove it, everything else has to move one space, right? And then array dot unshift. And then I have to provide, let's say if I'm adding 0 in the front right here. I forgot if it's a shift or unshift or switch, but anyway, one basically removes it, one adds it. Okay. And then lastly, if I want to splice, is interesting. Splice can basically, you can remove or add from any place, right? So if I say array dot splice, I have to provide an index. So let's say if I say 2, which means 0, 1, and 2. So this is the index I want to start from. Okay, then I can provide how many elements I'm removing. So if I say 1, which means it's going to just remove the second, the index element at that index, which is C, right? If I say 2, it's going to remove C and D both, right? And if I want to add something at the same time, because it's a complex one, if I want to add something to the same time, so I said remove two of them and then add, let's say F, right? Then it actually removes C and D and adds F. So splice is quite handy when you do want to do multiple things at the same time. But you can use either of them. I mean, when I remove from the back, you use push, pop. From the front, shift, unshift, and from anywhere, from the top or middle or front, you just use splice. Okay. Okay, so that's that. Let's look at some of the interesting features of arrays, which you're going to be using it. So typically, arrays are defined as a reference. So let's say if I define an array called bag, okay, and it has, let's say, eggs, pen, and key or something like that. I don't know. Okay, it's got 3 items in here. Okay, what if I create a copy? Bag 1 equal to bag. Okay. What if I create a copy? This is actually not a copy. What it does is actually, now bag 1 and bag, they're both pointing to the same object. Okay. So for example, if I remove something from the bag, so let's say bag dot pop, which means it's going to remove key, right? And if I console log both, let's just say first bag and then bag 1, they're gonna have the same object. So just removing from one, also remove from another one, it's not the case. It's the same object, right? So I'm created a reference. When I copy, it just points to the same object. Okay. There's no like explicit pointer in JavaScript, but this in a way creates a pointer, right? But what if in life you may really want to create a copy of an array which is independent of bag, right? So I want to create a copy of bag and then modify it. But if I modify bag, I don't want the bag 1 to get impacted, like here, right? So how do I do that? So for that, there's an operator which you're going to be using a lot. It's called spread operator. So you put 3 dots and then bag. What this does, it creates a copy of bag. Now, if I remove something from bag 1 is not going to get impacted, right? Okay, so now bag has 3 items or 2 items because I removed 1, but bag 1 is still intact. So this is called spread operator. Okay, and it basically allows you to create a copy. There are lots of interesting use of spread operator. For example, if I want to merge 2 arrays, okay, so this is the one use. Let's all try this out. This is an important concept to learn, because there are times when you want to create an actual copy of something and modify it without impacting the original array, right? Yeah, we can't simply do bag 1 equal to bag question mark. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, this is where JavaScript kind of diverts. Actually, JavaScript is actually stealing features from everywhere, right? So it's stealing from Python. A lot of things it is stealing from Python. A lot of things it's stealing from Ruby on Rails, because there are a lot of so there is a panel which decides all the features that goes in JavaScript, right? Because JavaScript is an evolving language and it's constantly evolving. And yeah, it's a little it's a little bit more work, but you know, that's what it is, right? I mean, yeah, even you will, Benjamin, if you'll find that, let's say if I want to create a random number in JavaScript, it's maybe 5 more steps compared to if I want to create a random number in Python, which is pretty simple, right? You just grab a rand int, import that, right, random, and then use to create any random number. If I want to create an integer, I can just use that library. There are not a lot of built-in libraries by default. However, people have written lots of libraries, so you can use it, and I'll show you how to use it later on. And that makes things much simpler. And that's why I think raw JavaScript is a little bit harder than you know, using something like React. Okay, so another thing is this operator is pretty useful in a lot of other sense. So let's look at, I'm just gonna comment this out. All right, so if I have a string, let's say, okay, this is a string, and I want to create, break every character, right? So what I'll do is console log. I think this works still. Let's see. Okay. It's a hidden gem, but you just take the string and then just spread it, and it breaks every single character. It basically converts into an array with every single character as an element, right? Another use for this is, I'm just gonna console log out. Another use is, let's say if I have a something like this. 4, 5, 6, right? And if I want to merge them, I can say console log it merges two arrays. Num1. Oh, nums1. I just call it num1. Right, you can merge them too as well. So there are 3 applications we saw, right? One is creating a copy of something, creating a copy of an array, splitting a string into multiple, and then merging 2 arrays. Any more question on this one? It's a very useful operator. For example, in JavaScript, if you have a function, I can, and I have, let's say, an array of, I mean, I know we haven't covered function yet, but let's say I have 5 arguments I'm passing in the array, in a function, right? So instead of writing all those arguments, I can just create an array and then just pass it a spread operator, and it just splits into those arguments. So it's pretty useful in that sense. You can do a lot of interesting things with it. All right. So I'm just going to save this. All right. You can do the same thing for objects, right? So, but objects is a little different. So let's say my bag has, eggs. And, usually it's a key and value pair, right? In objects. So I have 2 eggs. I have milk as 1. And I have a pen with 5 pens. Right? Let's say this is an object. I can create a copy of this object. Same way. Right. And this way, if I change bag 1, bag copy is not going to get impacted. Okay. Merging is interesting. So let's do this. I'm going to create another bag. It has the same object, same stuff. But instead of 2 eggs, it's got 3 eggs. Or instead of 1 milk, it's got, 4 milk. And instead of 5 pens, it's got 7 pens. What if I do this? So I'm just gonna merge 2 bags, bag and bag 1. What do I get at the end of the day? Console log merged bag. What do you think is gonna happen? Without even doing this, I'm not gonna run it. Remember, one of the first thing is that objects, unlike arrays, if I merge 2 things, it's gonna, if I have like a 1, 1, 1, and if I have another one which is called 1, 1, 1, if I merge them, I'll get 6 ones, right? So I can have duplicates, but objects can't have duplicates. So when I merge 2 objects with the same keys, right? What's gonna happen? It's gonna override. It's not gonna add or anything. It's just gonna override with the last property. So if I run this, and this is an important thing to understand, that what it's gonna do is so it first takes eggs, 2 eggs, 1 milk, and 5 pens, right? And then when it merges, it says, oh, eggs 2. If there's already 2, it's going to override. So this it actually gets override, but it's the same value, so it doesn't impact much, right? For milk 4, so it just overrides milk 1, right? So I have 4, and then pen, I have 7. So the last one basically wins when I merge. It doesn't add them, it just overrides. So let's say if I did not have eggs to begin with, right? When it overrides, it will basically add eggs, right? But anything that already exists, it overrides. So, and remember this kind of concepts, because when you do React, we're gonna be using a lot of these concepts. Any question on this one? Okay. An interesting function. Let's say if I want to create a string out of an object, there's an interesting function called JSON.stringify. Stringify. And if I pass, let's say, merge bag to it, or just pass bag to it, let's say, what it would do is it would convert it into an array. Oh, sorry, convert into a string. There are times when you have a large object and you would just want to convert into a string. Or not that JSON. It's JSON, not JSON. Okay, one way to do this is I forgot the syntax. Is it? Let's Google it. JSON.stringify. Okay, maybe I misspelled stringify. Oh, that's why I misspelled. Right, so it basically converts into a string, and you can actually convert it back as well. So JSON is pretty useful object that lets you, convert back and forth. It's called JSON parse would convert stringify. Oh, convert string to object and object to string. So if you do JSON parse and then pass the string, right? Let's say if I pass x2 or something like that, right? Console log like this, it will okay, what happened? Am I missing something? All right, I just put it back. Okay, if I just put this back, it should give me back the original. Yeah. Okay, so this you kind of do back and forth. All right. So this is an interesting or important, I would say, if you want to learn React. All right, any question? Cool. All right, so we covered a lot of stuff. Let's just look at our path for learning path, right? So I was gonna cover spread operator last time, but I covered this time. Basically, we covered object and object methods. right? We covered arrays, an object kind of mix and how to navigate it. The last thing remaining is scope. So let's cover that. So what is scope in JavaScript, right? Think of this as lifespan of a variable, right? And I think that Python has the same mechanism, right? I think pretty much all programming languages have the same mechanism, except JavaScript had a little bit of different scoping mechanism, but has changed. So scope is basically a lifespan of a variable, which means every variable that is born has to die. When I say die, which means it means it gets garbage collected, which means if you try to access it, it no longer exists. So let's say if I say let x equal to 1, and in some line here, if I console log x, I can access it, right? So basically anything that's defined in this space has the scope of till the end of this line, right? So if I run this, it will work. Okay. What if I flip? What if I have if I call it before it's defined? That's going to throw an error because its life starts from here and ends here somewhere, right? Which means if I try to access it, it won't be available, right? So that's the first thing you need to understand. You can define a variable before they are declared. Okay. That's the first rule. The second is I can create a subscope. And what is a subscope? So let's say we haven't learned the if else statement or stuff like that, but assume that there is some sort of statement which is defined by a curly brackets. So this is a subscope, right? So now we created a scope within a scope, which means anything that is defined between these curly brackets will be born and die within the curly bracket. So let's say if I have a let x equal to 1, I can access x here, right? And it works fine. However, if I try to access it outside, it won't work because its life is within this scope, which is this two curly brackets. Okay, but if I have a y which is outside, okay, which is an upper scope, right? Because curly brackets is within this scope. Let's say just do y here. And if I run this, obviously y is available here, right? Because it's within the same scope, right? So think of this as a hierarchy, right? Okay. What if I do this? What if I do this? What would happen? Okay. So I have so I have a upper scope, which is where the y is 1, and then I have inner scope where y is 2. But if I call it y in outer scope, remember this is not about y is 2 within the scope, but outside y is 1. So if I call it outside, it's 1. If I call it inside, it's going to be 2. Right. So this is an important thing to understand. When you try to access a variable, it's not available. You know that you're doing something wrong. You're trying to access something from outside scope. There's this caveat which is called, it creates a dead zone. The dead zone is remember, because I define a y again, right, within the subscope, y is available from this line to this line. Let's say if I have some lines before here, right, it available from this line to this line. But because that I have redefined y inside here, which means if I try to access y here, you know, it's not going to give this y here, right? Because I have one y, this creates a sort of like a dead zone where y doesn't exist between these two. Okay, and it gives you a reference error. So cannot access y before its initialization, which is right. But if I remove this y from here, right, then it will be fine. Then y is 1, right? But if I create y inside here, then within this y, this is almost like an invisible in a way, right? So this is another rule. You cannot redefine y in the same scope twice. I cannot do this, right? This is not allowed. But I can define y within subscopes, and that's fine. And most of the scope stuff it's pretty natural, right? It has anything that is outside you can access inside, but anything inside you cannot access outside, right? Which makes more sense. Imagine this is a house, and let's say if I create a room, right, say, and let's let this. So think of this way. So this assume this is outside. It's a city, right? Inside I create a room. Oh, inside create a house, and then within the house I have a room, right? So somebody who's inside the room has only access to that room, right? Or they own the room. Somebody who is inside the house has only access to the house. Somebody who's outside, this is like a government in a way. They pretty much have access everywhere. They can come inside a house, you know, and do everything, right? So this is how the rule works. Most outer scope is called global scope, which has access to pretty much everything. The only thing it doesn't have access to is if you can call it before it's defined, then it won't work. But otherwise, it has access to everything. And I think in terms of scope, pretty much all the languages, they work with this rule. JavaScript initially did not have this rule. It was kind of messed up, but they have fixed it later on. Okay. Any question on this one? And you will find out when you try to access something and it's not accessible, you know that you've done something weird with the scope. Okay. All right. Okay, so what I'll do, I think so next, we are close to 6. I think we pretty much covered what we wanted to cover, right? So I'll post the document that I created with all the example. So you can on Discord, so you can try it out, right? Just in case if you haven't. Next time, we're gonna look at some of the basic stuff. I mean, we looked at the variables and arrays and objects and all that stuff. Now, like really going the fundamentals of if else and for loop and all stuff like that. And again, Benjamin, for Python, it's very different. If else, I think it's pretty similar, but for loop and those are more like C++ kind of syntax. So yeah. So yeah, the schedule on the Discord. Yeah. So if you go to schedule, right? So if you go to Discord, there are multiple sections. In a general, it just, anybody wants to put anything that, for anyone to see, you will see this here, right? In the Zoom link, I have, the link and also the schedule here, right? In the homework, I'll post homework. This is where I just post anything that we learn. So what I'm going to do is everything that we learned today here, it's going to copy, right? And then what is today? Oh, 16th. It's not this one. My bad. Doors. This one. Okay, it's not letting me do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into two pieces. Okay, so I broke it into two pieces. All right, so yeah, you can see that here. The video recording is where actually Zoom, if I can change that, Zoom link and class time. Okay, so then we have that. Okay, so sorry for page that says that we're working for class. Yeah. So homework, yeah, you can. I mean, I'm okay if you are, like a week or so late. That's fine. Submit whenever you get a chance, right? But make sure you submit all the homeworks in time in the sense before end of the class, right? And you were saying, could you post the schedule on Discord? Oh, okay, schedule. Okay, yeah, I will post this schedule. I will post the schedule on there as well. I'm just gonna make it a little prettified, so make sure that it's this is just more like rough. So I'll post this as well as a curriculum or something. Okay. So this way you know what's coming next and all that stuff. That's good. And then lastly, I post all the video recordings. So today's video recording, I'll post it here as well. So like Benjamin, if you want to watch the previous one, just make sure. I mean, obviously it's long, so, but I think pretty much we covered like arrays, what we did last time. But I think it's probably good to review it anyway.
I'll watch it like I'll just skip to the important part,
Okay. Good. Yeah, I think because you're coming from Python, right? I think it's important to just get your head around the syntax. Yeah, I do 5 programming languages, and I have to switch between. So I teach Python to a bunch of high school students. I teach what is it? JavaScript here. I teach Swift. I teach Swift, Kotlin, and Dart, 3 languages. at UCSC. And so, but the JavaScript is my strongest language. So I can do JavaScript in my sleep. But whenever I switch to Python or Swift, I can really easily mess up. I start writing JavaScript syntax in Swift sometimes. But I have to, so the night before I teach the class, I create all the examples and everything. For this class, I don't need to create example because it's all in my head. But for other classes, I have to, because if I don't, then I really have a hard time just switching the gears, right? I forget the syntax. I know the concept in those languages, but syntax I struggle with. So if you're coming from Python, what I would suggest is, or any other language, then you have to practice a little bit to, get your head around it. So, it will stick in your head, right? Languages are like this. If you don't practice for 2 to 3 weeks, it kind of starts going away. You have a primary language, right? So if you do something that you do day-to-day basis for, like, let's say if you do for like a couple of years, it will stick in your short-term memory for much longer than something that you learned, a few weeks ago. It can easily evaporate. So yeah, practice is a key. Cool. Yeah, I think that's it, folks. Yeah, and I'll post some homework for today's classes, mostly about manipulating the object and array. So I'll create an object. I'll give you ways to manipulate it. So that's about it. Okay, so it'll be a simple homework. And also, don't forget to think about a final, because at the end of this class, we're going to build a game, right, together. But you have to also work on a final project that you're going to demo, right? So think about a game that you wanted to build. It could be a simple game like tic-tac-toe, guess the word, memory game, or if you want to go complex, you can build like a snake game and things like that. So if you don't have any idea, we can discuss next time, but at least think about it so you can start thinking about the requirement. And so when we start building React, you can visualize how it's gonna look like. Okay, so that would definitely help you plan for it. So I think it would take a few weeks to develop it. So I think if you start thinking maybe next week or so, at least you will have some idea of what you need, what requirement. If you're going to build a complex game, then yes. If you're going to build, let's say, a rock, paper, scissors kind of game, right? Yeah, there's some visual element and all that stuff, but you can easily finish in a week or so. But if it's something like snake game, it will take a couple of weeks easily. Okay. So make sure that you start thinking about it. All right. Anything else before we close?
So I just want to be clear about the homework. When would you want that due?
Usually I give 2 weeks due date, right? So if I give homework today, it's due in 2 weeks, right? But I understand if you can, if you need more time, that's fine. As long as all the homework is done before the end of this class, I'm okay, because I'm gonna grade. I grade as I get some time, right? So, but I would say don't take too much time. Otherwise, what will happen is, if you're trying to do the homework, something that I gave you like 3 weeks ago, you're gonna have a hard time, thinking about it. So while the content is fresh in your head, finish the homework. So yeah, but usually, if you do it in a two weeks, it's fine.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Have a good evening, and I'll see you guys next week, next Wednesday.
Pleasure, Patel. Have a good day.
Bye.